Looking at the streets of LA, you might think that this is the epitome of the affordable housing crisis.
The city has often been dubbed the homeless city, and in the center of it all lies a 50-block area where over 4,700 people sleep homeless every night. Yet this is only the beginning of the problem.
The real affordable housing crisis reaches much further than those we see living on the streets.
In a time where wages are stagnant, many teachers are finding it hard to make ends meet.
It's embarrassing to say this, but I do sell plasma so I can have gas money to make it to work.
I'm a college professor and I'm homeless.
All over this country, teachers are working 2 or 3 jobs in order to take care of their families.
Educators are the perfect example of the affordable housing crisis in action.
These people are highly educated and taking on one of the most important jobs there is, teaching the next generation. And yet they can't afford to live in our cities.
None of what's going up behind us here is affordable to a school teacher, to a bus driver, to somebody who works in a restaurant, to an orderly in a hospital, to a janitor.
And when cities are where jobs cluster, we create an impossible situation for these working class people, pushing them out of our cities with low wages and extreme house prices, and yet requiring them for many services.
Often, the only choice left for them is to spend more and more of their income on housing.
A rule of the thumb is that if you pay up to 30% of your income for housing, it's affordable.
More than 30, 40, 50% of the income being spent on rent, which leaves very little money to invest in quality of life, to make sure that your children have what they need to go to school.
They don't have any money left over for food or for their kids' clothes or for transportation. And so we know that this is out of whack.
People already burdened with housing costs often struggle to pay unexpected bills, with over 40% of Americans struggling to pay an unanticipated bill of over $400.
And sometimes a series of small events or a single small event will trigger homelessness.
Demetrius Giordades and Jane Everett, they became homeless after they had a stillborn baby, had to pay for the baby's funeral, and that used up all of their savings. Next thing they know, they're on the streets.
And when people can barely afford housing, they often subsidize on other important needs. In fact, in 2018, 17% of Americans skipped necessary medical care because they couldn't afford it.
The affordability of housing is directly connected to a person's ability to live healthy, safe, and to thrive.
And those already struggling to afford housing can easily become homeless, which can become a rabbit hole for even more problems.
On average, it costs the government $35,000 for every one person that lives on the street.
At the end of the day, if people have really serious chronic problems, it is less expensive to house them than to have them go in and out of emergency rooms and in and out of jails.
And the other problem is that those who can't afford housing will often move out.
We've seen this phenomenon happen in our hometown, Long Beach. With the major lack of affordable housing, many have been forced to relocate, and our city is losing prime-age workers at a rate of 5% each year.
When somebody looks at growing their business or placing their business in Long Beach and they see a statistic like that, it's going to be significantly alarming to folks. They're going to see no talent pool and they're going to think about another place to expand their business.
And without businesses, our economy suffers. In our country, it has simply become almost impossible for many to own a home. And with our current trajectory, this isn't going to change soon.
With decreasing salaries, rising development costs, and our shortage of affordable housing, the affordable housing crisis will continue to worsen if we don't act on it soon.
If we don't prepare for growth will still happen in a haphazard way, in an unsafe way.
Simply, if we want to keep progressing as a nation, everybody needs to be able to afford housing.
Still, our nation has a big gap between how much housing is needed and how much is provided.
There are 3 to 4 times as many people in this country in need of low-income housing or affordable housing that we can provide.
We've turned housing into a commodity where if you have enough money, you can have as much of it as you want, and if you don't have any money, then you can't have any of it.
And it's important to remember that things haven't always been like this.
When we cut our federal government's budget for housing support by 50% in the 1980s, when we stopped building housing that people can afford, the result is that people don't have homes they can afford, and that's what we're seeing on our streets.
By looking at how homeless populations in New York City have skyrocketed since the 1980s, we can see the important role the national government plays in funding affordable housing.
So there's a role for every level of government to play in creating more housing, helping people afford more housing.
We pass bond measures to make sure that our water quality is clean.
If you're hungry, we have the food stamp program.
We pass infrastructure measures to make sure that your roads are safe and your bridges are safe.
But if you don't have a place to sleep every night, the federal government says, too bad, sorry, that's not our problem.
As a country, we need to recognize that everybody, regardless of income, deserves availability and affordability of housing, and we can't waste any more time.
But when we work together as a nation, opening our eyes to all of those in need, we can solve this problem.